Your moral intuition has been taken away from you.
Our civilization isn't an emergency. We are descending down ever faster.
And your moral license to act has been denied to you.
We have to stop being willing to sacrifice the future of our people for our convenience.
We will not abandon you.
We're in the conflict though. You're either serving your enemy or you're serving your side. Right? Those are the choices. It's not whether or not to be in the conflict anymore. We're way past that. That's a luxury we no longer have.
Where good people have to hide, evil flourishes.
We will re-give you that moral authorization.
If we don't have a revolution, in other words, we don't get a reformation, we're going to have a civil war.
All right, and welcome back to the 8th installment of Field Notes. This is the series in which I interview the instructors of Modern Minuteman campaign. Today I have with me Orwoll, or Eric Orwoll. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Good to be with you for the second time. We spoke once before on a stream quite a while ago.
Yes, on your channel with Kurt and Brandon. And in fact, we actually met in person also once in 2019 when I was able to see you at your house with your family. It's always nice to take these online things into real life and actually shake a hand and look into the other's eyes. So, and I guess that's really also what you're involved in, right? Like your work consists to a large extent of taking what for a lot of people starts off online as perhaps an intellectual fascination, perhaps a vehicle to vent political frustration, and then giving them a practical means to make progress in a dimension of things that they say they care about, but perhaps have a hard time translating into actual activities, right? Like that's really the game that I think all of us in this scene should be playing, even though perhaps many of us aren't doing that yet. So, but before we get into the details of that, give us a bit of your background of how you kind of ended up doing this. Like, what did you do before all of this? And then we'll go further into your mission as well.
Yeah, well, my background was actually in classical music. So I went to the Eastman School of Music for French horn performance, and that's what I intended to do with my life. Of course, to take that route, you really have to dedicate yourself completely to practice. And usually people go on and get a master's degree and a doctorate in music if they're aspiring to either teach in university or play in an orchestra. I got one job out of my undergrad with Shen Yun. It's a traveling Chinese ballet company run by Falun Gong, which is actually a cult, as it turns out. So that was a very interesting experience. But around that same time, I was starting to be red-pilled on just the scale of the transformation that's happening, not just in the United States, but around the Western world. And it became clear that if I didn't get involved somehow, I would be failing to do my duty just as a Western person. So at that point, continuing, like I got admitted to grad school. I could have gone on to grad school and just done the classical music thing, but it didn't feel right. It's like the reason I was drawn to classical music was that I felt connected to that Western tradition, you know? So to go and indulge in the arts when really the foundations of our civilization are crumbling, it just seemed wrong. So I shifted gears and got more into just what would pay the bills in the meantime, and put the rest of my energy and effort into growing what I thought was the most important thing that was missing in the modern world, an alternative educational model. So I was promoting Platonic philosophy over the last 10 years on YouTube and advocating for a physical institution. I still advocate for a physical institution to teach classical Western philosophy and music. I think we can do all of this. Like the arts, I don't mean to say they're unnecessary, but they have to be built on something a lot more solid, which is an integrated culture on the ground lived, not just something you read in old books, which that's been the case for too many of us for too long.
Right.
So, yeah, I just went to work in blue collar jobs, read basically the entire Western canon out of college over the last decade and a little more, and have been promoting race realism and all of our kind of right wing talking points the best that I could. And then over the last 2 years, of course, I've been leading Return to the Land. So I've been putting the call out. We need intentional communities. We need alternative institutions, parallel institutions. And finally, like 3 years ago, a group came together that was serious about seeing something actually change and making something happen. And that included some of the co-founders of Return to the Land, including Peter Siri. And what he brought to the table was really this alternative legal framework for intentional community that allows us to do our own thing. Because for too long, people would say it's simply illegal to have a white community. You know, you're not allowed to do that. You're going to be persecuted, or you're going to get Waco'd or whatever. And with Peter's legal model, which now has stood to legal scrutiny to some extent, the Arkansas Attorney General looked at our whole model and, you know, investigated it for more than a month and said, as far as they can tell, we're not doing anything illegal. So that was really the game changer. He brought the viable legal framework. We had already recruited people with resources, with the necessary skills to build an intentional community on the ground. So everything sort of just providentially came together at the right time. And we bought this land here in Northeast Arkansas, and we've been developing it ever since. That's where I am currently. I finally finished out this office building / studio, which until recently I had like stained this part right behind the camera, but you could see if the camera moved that like it was, anyway. So finally, you know, we're getting there. We're almost fully operational, and membership is doing really well. Recruiting, we can't keep up with the number of people who want to interview to join the PMA.
I just had my application interview as well, so I look forward to the decision on that. I hear that you guys are interested in Europe, and that's where I am and where I would like to play a role as well. So we'll see about that. And I guess you also just had your October gathering on the ground. How was that?
It was great. Yeah, our biggest event yet, the most successful. It was nothing but positive responses. When you've been part of these online communities, talking in terms of ideology and philosophy and just all big picture all the time, it is so refreshing to actually meet people on the ground and experience the rest of it. You know, they say nonverbal communication is about 80% of communication in the first place, but we don't really think that way, especially a lot of people who are ideologically driven, like people in our circles tend to be. When they meet others in person, and especially when it's connected to a living on the ground project, it's not just meeting in a conference center somewhere. We are physically building towards a larger society and community that we're all a part of. Then that the other 80% kicks in. And for some people, it's not something they expect, you know, the way that it's satisfying. Like one of the reasons this came together was that we got together to help build infrastructure for this kind of classical philosophy institute / media center that I had envisioned and I put a call out for. And we weren't immediately intending to go for something at this scale, but getting just a dozen guys together, working together, you know, trying to build something to help our cause, it was so rewarding that immediately everyone who was there wanted to pitch in. Even if they didn't have a lot of resources, they wanted to get involved and put down money. It
shifts the whole dynamic.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, the gathering was excellent. A lot of people now who attended are interested in joining this community here, as well as the other communities that we currently have planned.
Great. Yeah, I guess something that stood out from what you talked about just now is this difference between education for the individual's sake and education for the sake of a group that the individual may be a part of, and where they can actually take up a role that is integrated into a larger whole, rather than this kind of hyper-individualistic, atomistic attempt to advance oneself in the socioeconomic strata, rather than in a kind of group that one is a part of. And to the benefit of the group as well. And I think oftentimes, at least up until not too long ago, these ideological or intellectual attempts to contrast individualism with collectivism have mired a lot of the conversation, both online and I think elsewhere, where this sense that the West is uniquely individualistic in comparison to the rest of the world, which is true to a large extent, but to my understanding, it's actually more that it is uniquely heroic, where the individual can take on an outsized capacity to benefit the overall group by perhaps going to war for the group, or by going to war with the sclerotic status hierarchy that the group has kind of degenerated into, and thereby renew its health by perhaps taking out a tyrant, or by reorganizing people around a new form of cooperation. So I guess, how do you view this difference of education for the individual's sake and education for kind of the individual in a group setting? Does that make sense for you as a way to contrast these things?
Sure. Yeah, you can look at education as a market function, essentially, to prepare individuals for roles in the economy. And if you view it that way, then you're missing kind of the main part of what education is doing socially. It's about enculturation. It's about setting shared expectations and norms that build trust and allow for low friction interactions, and also allow for a sense of greater meaning that is shared. That's not just, I can instrumentalize these particular set of skills for my personal economic desires. And that's something that, it's not really sacrificing in the way that people might think. Like, contributing to that larger project, it builds up the commons in a way that ultimately benefits all of us. And that is like the Western European strategy in a unique way. Paradoxically, because we are kind of more individualistic or heroic, we're not thinking about our clan, right? In the Middle East, everyone is tied to their kin group and their cousins and their uncles. They're nepotistic with them. They try to get each other jobs. They try to marry within the family, and that results in a whole other set of problems. But in the West, we had the Catholic Church set prohibitions against cousin marriage, and maybe for other reasons also, maybe those Indo-European roots where heroism and fame and having your name like last forever and impact vast areas, maybe that also kind of set this tone in the West. But because we have that, we have this exceptional type of person who wants to have an impact, not just locally, not just in their family, not just for themselves. They have an aspiration to something higher, and they don't have as much of those intermediary obligations and loyalties. Not that they don't have them at all, but it's just a weaker force. So you have these kind of two poles: the collective commons, where we're all kind of dumping into a common store of knowledge with the Western university system. And then you also have like, I want to aspire to something beyond just, am I going to bring income for my family? I want to like disclose new truths for humanity. But of course, that's also our weakness, because we were aiming for these very universal and far-reaching accomplishments. We didn't have a sense of the people that we were actually serving. It was functional because it was for Europeans. De facto, it was. The university system, right, in the Christian West it was all white people, of course it was. But we didn't really kind of grasp like Christendom / Western culture / white identity remained confused because we weren't confronted with the other in the way that other groups of people were. In the Middle East, they were also clannish because you had tribes that came from radically different racial backgrounds in some cases. And so those lines, the delineations were a lot firmer. So, it has its pros and its cons, but we have to lean into the strength that kind of strategy gave us, which means like, as we serve our common interests in culture, like upholding justice and fairness and equality, even things that the left values as well. It's like the kind of perversions of the right and the left is now the left-right dichotomy, but the virtues that both sides are seeking, the values they're seeking, are what allowed the West to be this dominant power in world history that it has been and can be again. It's just we have to exercise it directly at a communal level, and also like elevate the individual and celebrate the individual. So we have to be simultaneously like more collectivistic than other groups in some sense, and also more individualistic. It's not like it's a dichotomy either or.
Right. Yeah, I think the Catholic Church's prohibition on cousin marriage did a big had a big impact on the way that we breed or outbreed rather. But I think that this was also something that was even present beforehand, even though it was codified by the Catholic Church. There was definitely this this pattern of the young men of the tribe going away from the tribe once they reach a certain age of maturity, and then attempting to, at first at least, survive even alone or with other young men out there in the wild, and then perhaps over time build a new group out of perhaps the other clans that they raid or subjugate or steal the women from, or whatever the actual pattern may have been. So this goes back into the far reaches of our prehistory. I guess this is also still a cultural practice today, or used to be, which in the German world, which is where I'm from, I'm German, there's still kind of vestiges of this in what's called the journeyman practice, right? You have people who learn a trade like carpentry or metalworking, and then they are forbidden from being within 100-kilometer sphere of their hometown for perhaps 2-3 years, and then have to make their livelihood work outside of the area where they grew up, and therefore have to rely on the charity of strangers as well as their ability to provide value to strangers to actually make their living, and then build a kind of mastery that way. So this goes very, very deep into our collective practices, and I guess the question today is, how do people do this given the new technological environment that we're all in? I think the internet has a large effect on us, of course, in terms of opportunities that it provides us, but it also has a large effect on us in terms of distractions it offers us, right? It's much harder to naturally get the incentives from one's environment to make real world progress in one's life, especially because it feels like things are always happening in this alternative sphere that one can follow passively. So how do you view kind of the challenge that perhaps you yourself also experience, but definitely our generation in general experiences with respect to the medium of the internet? And then how do you view a productive use of it today?
Yeah, it has all sorts of benefits that it offers me personally. I mean, even AI, which is sort of using all of the data that's been collected on the internet over decades now in like this really rapid way where it's searching hundreds of sources and collating information and presenting it to you and making research much, much, much faster than it's ever been. Of course, you have to be careful and check your sources and make sure that it's not confabulating, which it does like to do. But yeah, at the same time, the way that people are sharing information and what gets rewarded in the algorithm is setting up bad incentives for poor scholarship. There is a pull towards the least common denominator, and there's also a pull towards what is sensational, because I mean, the advertisers have moved from, back in the day, I guess the concept with advertising was we are going to present this product and the merits of this product objectively and allow the consumers to decide, right? And then it moved to we're going to kind of tap into their instincts and their emotions and get their attention that way. And then it became really a science of attention. And when it comes to websites, and especially on your smartphone, where perhaps also they're using camera feedback and actually seeing where your eyes are going, or they just know, like based on the movement in your scroll, how long are you spending on each little bit of the screen? Where is your actual attention? Now they're using AI models to enhance those aspects of the user experience that just get that visceral engagement. And what does that actually look like on the screen? Well, it's dead bodies from Gaza. It's like attractive women. It's, softcore pornography sometimes. It's things that stimulate. And that's not exactly the kind of attention that historically led to higher civilization. Like the whole thing with philosophy and religious insight is that it stems from, Plato talks about this very explicitly, it stems from that higher rational part of the soul that's detached from appetitive demands. And so we have this pull down towards appetite, like where does our attention automatically go? And you definitely see that. I remember back in 2012, 2013, when I was first getting red pilled on a lot of this stuff, there were long form, like mini documentaries that casual, like amateur YouTubers would make on race realism, getting into the genetic data, getting into like the principles of why we should expect group differences and exactly what those differences are. And this information is still available today, but the discourse is not being driven by that fine-grained data. Instead, it's just like AI has collated and summarized heaps of data collected over generations. Now, our content creators take for granted, like, well, this meme has really gained traction. It's ultimately based in this fine-grained data, but the meme is what they reference, and then everyone's just kind of echoing the same memes without being grounded in the knowledge that gave rise to them in the first place. And then when they're challenged, ultimately those worldviews will collapse. So I see it sort of as a curve of efficient use of this kind of heuristic simplification of our worldview, where at first, you appeal to a broader and broader audience, but then as you go up in the bell curve, the depth of that understanding and the applicability of the insight it can afford diminishes. And then, well, we haven't gotten to this point, but I'm afraid unless we have a return to fine-grained data and, philosophically comprehensive insight, then like our messages won't perpetually have the same traction they have right now. It's like we were more data driven, we were more scientific in our worldview before, and now those memes went out, but now we just keep on passing the same memes around. Right. And then also you have hyperpolarization, where within a given community, it's not just like the internet in general has these bad incentives, which it does, but each particular community, whatever is most salient to that niche audience is what's amplified. Whoever goes furthest to the right, furthest to the left, the extremists are really receiving a benefit. And then also whoever appeals to the kind of mediums that inherently grab people's attention. So there's been a shift to short form written content and like video content that is really easily digestible, rather than those like, we're putting the data on the screen, we're going to talk for a long time about this. It's so, I mean, like with discipline, this era of information technology offers more possibilities than ever before, and we can have more advanced, more like just and realistic and grounded communities than in the past. But without, it's like with great power comes great responsibility. Effectively, it opens up the door for all sorts of abuses and all sorts of benefits, of course.
Oh, and I'm back. Had a little stop there, but I'm good. Cool. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think the game then for the average perhaps social media enjoyer is to set some real world objectives for themselves that the use of these tools can facilitate perhaps, but is also balanced out by actual real world activity that doesn't consist of sharing memes or participating in group chats and kind of doing what lots of people call the surrogate activity that discharges this anxiety that we feel that we're alone, disoriented, don't have strong relationships, are not really making progress against real world objectives. And I think this is what the challenge for people really is. I guess you yourself already well along that way. Perhaps tell us a bit about how you view what your mission is. You already said a bit about Return to Land really being kind of your project now that you pour your energies into, but how do you view your kind of medium to long-term goals, and how does Return to the Land and your other activities fit into that?
Well, I guess first I'd just like to reinforce what you're saying about the difference between having some kind of tangible physical result of your efforts and it being pure talk. Because the kind of person that's selected in a group chat that's talking about how one day they will change the country, what the country should look like, it's a very different kind of person than who demonstrates themselves on the ground as useful and beneficial to the people around them. And also for social media influencers, the kind of person who appeals to a broad audience through a video medium or through tweets or through whatever medium online, it's going to be a different kind of person from the person who you would select as a true leader of your actual physical community. Again, it's that like 80% of communication is nonverbal. A lot of it is communicated in small acts of consideration and kindness. Like you want to follow someone. For example, like I'm a big fan of Thomas Rousseau of Patriot Front. I actually wholeheartedly support Patriot Front. Maybe I disagree with some of Thomas's personal philosophy, but I respect him because I have been to those events and I've seen him working alongside his men, actually working harder than most of his men, also taking the time out of his day to talk to everyone in his organization. So that's something that doesn't come across in a video clip. And you have someone else out there who is putting all of their effort into presentation and rhetoric, but they're not actually leading people on the ground in the way that, say, Thomas Rousseau is. So if we were in like the evolutionary context in our tribes, you would pick Thomas 10 out of 10 times because he's demonstrated with his behavior that he does actually care about the whole. He's not going to manipulate that power. Whereas online, you're going to more often pick the person who has curated the right image of themselves, who has invested that effort into the appearance rather than the reality. You look frozen, so I just want to check in and see if you're still present here. Seems like you're not. Okay. So we're dealing with internet issues. I'll go ahead and wait so that I don't go on some long digression about my goals that he's not privy to. So we'll just kind of hang out here for a minute. I'm not even sure if I'm still streaming for you all. So, and here I am by myself again.
I'm sorry. Here I
Okay,
am.
no worries. Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, I was able to hear you, but I wasn't visible on the stream. I'm good.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So just to amplify that point, like having the physical context is going to allow you to select the right leaders ultimately, and that's what matters. I also, before I get to like long-term goals, I always go back to the Hellenes because that is, for me, like Western civilization comes out of Greece. Maybe there's influence from Rome and from Judea, people like to say. And there are obviously influences deeper in the past, Indo-Europeans and Central Europe and, the Anglosphere. Everyone contributed to what Western civilization is today. But I think the bulk of it, like the root of it, is really in the Greek city-states. And they set the right incentives. They had contests for their poetry. They had contests for their gymnastics. They were a hyper-competitive people. If they were just one unified nation state, they probably would not have dominated the rest of civilized history in the way they have. They were constantly at war within their own tribes. Different demes in Athens would be competing for influence. So at every level, it was competitive cooperation. And we need to set those same kinds of incentives. And we do that at our events. We have contests physically, we have debate contests. And you don't get any of that kind of selection, that well-rounded on-the-ground selection for who you're putting in positions of influence in your organization if it's only calls, if it's only we get on a Telegram chat. That's also just as an aside, like we've eliminated the general chat in our group Telegram for our DTL because it selects for the wrong kind of person intrinsically. Who spends the time in a scrolling text chat is who has time on their hands. And that's not the high human capital. No offense if you like lurking in text chats, but it's you really need to curate rather the environment in which you're evaluating the people in your network, your organization. So goals, we're going to keep hosting these events like we've been hosting. We're going to host more regional meetups within Return to the Land. The next event in the spring, we have new ideas for how that's going to go. I don't want to announce any of that just yet, but the numbers are looking very good. We're going to professionalize. We're going to streamline. Like, you won't have to wait as long on your application status as currently you do if we implement all the changes we're wanting to implement. And yeah, a lot of that will be determined also by what the enemy throws at us. Currently, we're not facing any formal legal charges. We have received requests for information from various government agencies who are looking at us because they've been tipped off that, hey, you should look at us by leftists. But so depending on what kinds of challenges come up, that'll dictate what we can afford to spend our time on. But as it stands, I think creating the right kind of on-the-ground community environment, competitive environment, but also like building friendships, building trust, that's the work that absolutely has to be done, regardless of what scale of political, economic change you think needs to happen. Like, if you think it's all downstream from the money supply and we need sound money, or we need the right kind of cryptocurrency, even if you're right about that, still, once we implement the perfect coin that's going to save us, we'll still have to rebuild those neighborhoods and relationships with our extended family. And like, America is not just going to fix itself. The West is not just going to fix itself because something like the right person gets in office. It'll have an influence, but the work of actually implementing like our own kinds of holidays and celebrations and culture, it's been tried before to do that artificially. And what I found is that it can't be imposed. It's not like one person just lays down, this is the social experiment, this is what, unless it's literally a cult, and then one person can do that. But I think in general, cults are not as resilient as genuine cultures. So we're trying to approach it in terms of culture, where we're accepting feedback and ideas from everyone involved. We're encouraging participation, and we're seeing, where we kind of meet in the middle. And we're expecting to meet in the middle, like the way that I thought we were going to organize when initially this was about, we're going to build infrastructure for a school and media center. Like, what I had in mind then has very little resemblance to what we're doing now. And so anyone who comes into an organization needs to realize it's an exercise in collective intelligence. Mm-hmm. And if you just got exactly what you wanted out of it, then you wouldn't be using an organization for what it can be. It can be a higher level intelligence than any of the people contributing to it. It can solve problems that no individual can solve. So if you enter into a group expecting it to be an output for your personal ambitions and vision, then you're underestimating what an organization is supposed to be. It's supposed to be larger than the people who contribute to it.
Right.
So,
yeah. The way that you best show up to a group is by asking, what can I contribute? And then getting out of it something is as a side effect of supporting people's success and doing something valuable. I think you just said something important, which is all these other foci, like changing the money supply or getting our guy into power or any of these other objectives that other people have. They are all valuable objectives, but how do people actually purport to achieve them? Do they purport to achieve them by waking more people up? That has never really worked by just creating broad-based awareness, right? Like, you can have as much awareness as you want, but if you don't have actual mechanisms, actual power, collective power available to pick a goal, to pursue the goal with determination, to stick to that goal for longer periods of time, and then to actually put pressure on the levers that would get you that goal, you're not going to get it. And so I think oftentimes you and Return to the Land and projects like this get characterized as a retreat from the engagement with the conflict, whereas I think it's actually a forward motion into the conflict by creating strongholds of trust building, of relationship building, of organizational capacity building, which can then be dedicated to supporting these other efforts where they make sense in relationship to the goals of the group.
Exactly. Yeah, people who are against membership organizations, generally speaking, when the right moment strikes and it's time for our guys to take over the system or something, how do you expect to have the experience to get together and accomplish your objectives? Like, you don't know each other or trust each other if until that point, like literally until the day when the coup happens or whatever, you've just been siloed off doing your own things. Like, you have to build trust, you have to build relationships. Any cadre that seizes power, not that that's ultimately my goal, like I don't think it's even essential or a necessary part of my personal objectives. Like, I think building these communities is actually enough. I can see myself working with the United States government as it exists, working within the NATO framework, or in Europe, the EU framework, working with the UN. Like, I'm not antithetically opposed to these institutions. I think I can accomplish my objectives, which is to build living spaces for white people, white communities, to celebrate our heritage and like have health for our own institutions and social networks. I can do that, but still, if the goal was to eventually seize power, the groups that have done that were very well networked before they ever got in the doors, of government, like the Bolsheviks, obviously, like these sorts of groups. And that starts often in an intellectual way. There's an author, there's someone putting out ideas. We've been doing that. That's why so many of us are aligned. We have social scientists on our side who are well respected. We have other sorts of scientists, philosophers. I think we could still improve in that domain as well. It's not like I'm saying we're done with all of that, now we can move on. But now we are in this phase of building up organizations, and we've tried many of them. Many have risen and fallen, but that's how it works, because societies, social organisms are bigger than what we can comprehend. And so there's no one simple trick to building this, foolproof thing necessarily, by definition. If it's a successful corporation or organization, it's going to be something you can't fully predict. That's why, people get paid millions of dollars to try to bet on markets involving these corporations. Right. It's, no matter how much insight you have, no one has 20/20 on exactly what's going to come out of those sorts of things. So when you start an, AIM or Identity Europa or Patriot Front, like, it is impossible to know exactly what needs to be done up front. We only get that feedback because organizations like that have never existed before. Similar organizations might have been tried, and we can, get some guidance from, as a rule of thumb, what does well and what doesn't, but also the technological context has changed, the cultural context has changed, social incentives, sexual market incentives have changed. Like, things are always changing. And so when we build a new organization, necessarily we're in uncharted territory. So the only thing to do is to try building many organizations and see what survives. It's an evolutionary process. And at the end of, roughly a decade of serious organization building on our side, realistically, it's like we're talking 8, 9 years of serious organization building. We have a handful of organizations that have lasted, that are doing things. So Natural Law Institute really actually seems to be one that has stuck with it. They've been operating for quite a while. Return to the Land, it's been operating well. Patriot Front, they've been operating well. And there's not a lot else out there. So it's, thinking ideologically about organizations it's like a framing issue. It's a category error. It's not a matter of who is right in the organization. It's about what thrives, what survives, what is actually attuned to the habitat that we're dealing with today. So by far the safest thing to do, of course, is to join existing institutions, gain that wisdom, be part of the living social experiment, and then, if necessary, branch off. because that's what life does. It doesn't start de novo. It always branches from something else. In some sense, Patriot Front branched from something else. In some sense, even Return to the Land kind of branched from something else. I had my own chat rooms and stuff going for quite a while, advocating what I was. And Peter Siri, he had his own kind of community going on. So, and then other people who came to the table, they had their own experiments. They were woven together into a new kind of trunk of a new tree.
Right.
And yeah, you just have to accept, like, you're part of a living tradition with these things. You have to kind of sacrifice that sense of control and like, this is what it's going to be. I have 100%, omnipotent oversight over what's going to happen. It's like, you got to just surrender some things if you're going to be part of a larger movement.
Right. Yeah, I agree completely. I think what people often underestimate when they see one of these organizations pop up, or when they imagine they will create the one to take them all over, is that you can do this in a month, a year, 2 years. Like the organizations that are still around today, and the organizations that are at least moderately successful, they are outgrowth of years of dedicated effort, of building relationships, doing the boring and hard work of resolving conflict, of bringing visions into alignment, of picking good uses for resources, of surviving serious disagreements. And so what I would invite people who are watching to consider is get started on that, or if you're already started on that, keep going and find the people that you can rely on for small things first, and then over time build up that direct understanding of, oh, when I go to dinner with these guys, like he will like take on the tab for everybody, and like, oh, this is probably a stand-up guy. That's the guy I should hone in on and build a strong relationship with. Not that this is now the expectation of going to dinner with people, and people who pick up the tab is who you should pay attention to, but stay attuned to who takes on small risks, who takes on small sacrifices on behalf of others, and then do the same. And this is how trust grows. This is how the ability to accomplish stuff grows, because when you can trust that when somebody else is under pressure, they will still come to your aid, or when you're under pressure, they will still assist you. That is how you gain the courage and the strength to actually accomplish stuff over the long term. If you are alone, isolated, demoralized, with no skills, with no real objective to pursue, then of course you're going to lose. And honestly, in a way, we shouldn't be surprised that we have been losing, because we haven't been doing that for the longest time. And I think this is something to really be extremely clear-eyed about. If you're losing, there's something you're doing wrong. And if you're not paying attention to why you're losing and what the other side is doing that is making them succeed, then in some cosmic sense, you deserve to lose. So take responsibility for the losses that we have had, and pay attention to the people who are doing something that works, and then go from there. I want to ask you a couple of quick questions that came in advance of this interview that people wanted your answers on, kind of rapid fire. So I'll just go through them one by one. The first one is, I think, from Meta Prime. He said, I would be curious if he's read my article, but the specific concern that I have with Back to the Land has always been moving too quickly and not spending enough time building trust and cohesion through smaller projects. My question would be, how does Eric hope to build the trust necessary to build a successful community?
Well, most of the trust gets built here in person. I think in-person meetups are critical. You really don't know someone until you've met them. Again, 80% of that communication, it's not just nonverbal. I think there's something, spiritually energetic that's exchanged in person when you meet someone. So I think you need a lot of in-person meetups. And we had several chats in advance of ever meeting the co-founders of Return to the Land. So we had weekly video calls going months. And then finally we met up for a get-together where work was involved. Socially getting together and having a party, or like even a conference where there are lectures, it's not the same as actually working together. Hormonally as well, like when men work together, I forget the specific hormone is called.
Vasopressin.
It's similar to endorphins and serotonin or like bonding molecules. So there is something like just chemically, you get it when you're working together. That trust
Shared
is
challenge,
literally
shared
built
pressure.
up. Yeah. Yeah, it's important. But also, you see, it's a stress test. You see what people are willing to do, what they're not willing to do, how group-minded they actually are when the rubber meets the road. You can't
Is
take
somebody
people's word
capable
for
of
it.
subordinating themselves to a shared objective? Are they able to
Of
govern their own
course.
emotions, right? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So right now, our model essentially, because we have already built this, because I mean, frankly, of all the groups out there, even groups like Patriot Front, where they get together very often, they accomplish objectives in an organized, coordinated way. But because we've been physically living here for 2 years together, like we built, just as a matter of fact, a lot more trust. We've exchanged more interactions with each other than basically any other group that I'm aware of in our spheres. And then the more long-lived communities, not all of which I totally agree with. Like I recently visited a Christian identity church, the Church of Israel in Missouri. But they're white identitarians in their own way, and they've built up a kind of trust and a living body over 60 years, 70 years. And I know that I can't compete with that, with something that's been around basically a flash in the pan by comparison. But by our own token, like in our own spheres, return to the land, like living together and knowing each other, there is no comparison with that. So that's our real base. Like that is, you got to appeal to the deepest ground that is shared in common to start with, and then build on top of that. So for us, that looks like hosting these events where there is a tight-knit group who actually trusts each other because we've had to work together to get to this point, and we've had to take risks. Like we know that we're all risking everything to do this together. And on top of that, then we can host people who participate in our work parties or whatever our events may be, our competitions, and we see if they fit into that trusted network or not. So once you have a trusted network, it's not a matter of, well, we need to spend an indefinite amount of time having one-on-one chats or going to visit people. It's like, when you have the network, you need to build up from what exists. We have a highly trusted network. We're going to bring people into that and organically scale.
Right. Next question. Somebody asks, I don't know whether it's facetious, but he says, walk me through the process step by step, how I'd be able to create my own intentional community as a young man living in America now. I'm not sure that you need to answer it that way, but I guess my answer would be...
Step one, join at returntotheland.org. That's why we exist. There are a lot of things that can go wrong, and
Right.
we want people also to have autonomy and do their own thing. If you have a very strong vision you want to realize, first recognize that for it to be realized, you're going to meet some other people in the middle. Exactly what you have in mind won't happen. That's not how it works. But also, you're going to benefit by contributing to and gaining from the people who have been doing this longer than yourself. If you want to lead, first, obviously, you have to follow.
Yeah. What steps are being taken to attract women to these communities?
Well, most of the women who come in are married to the men who come in. There are a handful of women who were the ones who found out about Return to the Land, and then their husbands joined because they heard. And there are also single women. Not as many single women want to show up to an event like this, where naturally there's going to be more single guys. So I think the family is kind of first and foremost. That's the kind of healthy social dynamic, and that's how any colony basically functions. Like single women don't go to form colonies. Single men show up, and families do show up. So now that we're already established, we're prioritizing families as far as that's possible. And the gender ratio issue, we will resolve the old-fashioned way by breeding over the generations. So, and also like the single guys who come in, helping them be better socialized and gain better skills and become better networked, that will help them find women who then obviously will build the greater community.
I think this is an underappreciated pathway for men to kind of find a mate, actually, which is to essentially leave behind the whole sex wars or gender wars and this whole red pill kind of identity building out of, oh, women are doing things wrong and they're terrible and I will never perhaps get a wife. Like, okay, maybe, but maybe the path is simply to do what men have always done, which is to band together with other men to develop themselves and build an attractive tribe, and then make yourself an attractive target for women to join. And I think this is what Return to the Land will eventually do, right? Like, it is always attractive for women to join a cohesive community where there's lots of social engagement and offer.
Obviously, yeah. I mean, there's a reason why, for instance, like bands, being part of a band is attractive to women. Not just are you demonstrating your individual talent and accomplishment, but you're showing your social capital. Like, look, I'm able to organize with other men. We can move our equipment around the country. We can accomplish something. And so that's something that people have not adequately grasped about this as well, that once you join a community like this, if you build a home, if you have developed this network of highly trusted friends, that comes through. That will be shown if you ever invite a woman over. The problem is young guys have come here and they've prioritized making money, and they're worried about getting the woman, and they've not prioritized building up their homesteads. Like, it's a weakness of our organization that this has not happened. No, technically there is one person. So Peter, when we started, was single. He built up his homestead and now he's married, right? But like no other young man who came in decided, first, I'm going to build a house, and then like I'll meet a woman and she'll see that this is actually a good place for her to live. Create the habitat, build it, and they will come. Right? But everyone's so like paranoid and anxious about finding a woman, they go back to the market system that is dominant right now, and like, I have to make enough money, I have to be in a city, like basically I have to be part of their system. And that's like, in this local area, in a rural area like this, women want to get away from town. They want the homestead. Many of them actually do. And you shouldn't be going after the ones who don't want that. Like, if you go and put yourself in the middle of liberal cities, what kind of woman are you going to find?
Right.
So be the kind of person that you need to attract the woman that you want, who would be attracted to the kind of man that you are. Don't like make yourself look like the rest of the high status men out there. Like, be who you want to be, so that the woman that's attracted to you is attracted to your qualities, and they're going to be the right kind of person. So
I can attest to that.
Seems so simple, but yeah.
I can attest to that as well. In my own life, it has gone exactly this way. I've essentially spent 10 years, well, 8 years or so, to build out my understanding of the world, to make my own way in the world, to accumulate relationships that are of value to me and that I think will be of value for the rest of my lifetime. And only about 2 years ago did I then meet a woman that actually was attracted to the kind of man that I had become as a consequence of doing that. So this does work, and it is hard perhaps to trust it when you are in a circumstance where that feels very far away from your lived reality, but that is the way that it works. And unless and otherwise, perhaps be honest about what you actually want. A lot of the time I hear a lot of this, I want a based woman, I want her to be traditional and so on, but then at the end of the day, the people that they actually end up dating, or the habits that they actually exercise on a day-to-day basis, don't actually demonstrate that they do. I think oftentimes I think Nick Fuentes is a good example of somebody who, like, nominally has the direction of we should be going back to how it was some time ago, but then in his own life he essentially lives in the city. He enjoys the multicultural kind of experience of the good food and so on. So, and he has been criticized on that. But anyway, last question from the community. What guardrails are in place to stop subversion, and do the communities have legal funds in place to fight the inevitable lawsuits?
Yeah, we do. We don't have monthly contributions yet because we wanted to scale as an organization. We've received a lot of donations. So we've spent a lot of it on legal research. It will be probably necessary for legal defense, but in order to be prepared to defend ourselves, we have to improve our existing documents as well as they can be improved. So yeah, we do have still like tens of thousands of dollars in our budget, which, when it comes to lawyers, doesn't go that far. So we have to build more sustainable revenue streams, probably membership dues. We'll have to just set that expectation, set that norm. You're part of this because you want to see it succeed. For it to succeed, we have to have adequate legal representation and also administrative budgets, because you can't expect dozens of people to work like full-time hours for nothing forever. In the beginning, dedicated volunteers, that's how you bootstrap an organization. Just like any entrepreneur, you should expect not to be seriously compensated the first 2 years of your business. You're going to put everything in, and if you do enough work, then ultimately it'll pay off. But yeah, the guardrails for subversion, when it comes to that, it's really a matter of not putting people in influential positions unless we have met them and socially tested them in the ways that I was talking about before. And it's more important that you're looking for what qualifies someone to leave the organization than what qualifies them to enter it. Like, set the filtration that you can. It's never going to be perfect. You're always going to have to kick people out. So have the foresight of having fair processes whereby people are kicked out, and be very explicit. If there's a problematic behavior that can contribute to subversion, like a lot of back channel communication, then you have to say, like, hey, when it comes to what could be construed as gossip or that, except in this limited circumstance. So if you have an issue with someone in our organization, you approach them directly, you give it a chance for resolution. If not, you go to the board, and then the board issues warnings. And then if that doesn't result in anything, there's a formal mediation procedure. And if that doesn't result in anything, then in a public meeting where everyone hears what's going on, if you have to air these issues, you can air them. But if at any point in that you go around the back and start saying, hey, don't trust this person because of that, well, then if we catch wind of that, that's grounds for removal. And you really have to identify what are those behaviors that can be exploited by subversive types. So over time, you'll kind of learn the profile, like concern trolling, someone who ostensibly is trying to improve the organization, saying, I'm concerned about this, I'm concerned about that. But really, they are not concerned about making the organization better. They have some kind of antipathy or resentment, probably because either it's not theirs, or because they're not doing well in the organization, or they just like are an antisocial person who's always going to have problems with no matter what they join. So you'll identify those behaviors more and more readily as time goes on. But again, it's more about learning to identify the problematic stuff once they're in. Because if you try to kick everyone out or screen everyone out, then you're going to screen out too many people. It's like you need a semi-permeable membrane, but if it's too tight, then you're not going to scale and you'll miss quality people. So it's kind of a tricky thing. In the future, we've thought about maybe doing DNA tests for leadership positions. That wouldn't be a bad idea. So we're thinking of new things all the time.
Makes sense. All right, we are at the hour mark. I'm seeing in the chat there's been a little bit of activity. I don't see any questions there, so that's good. Then lastly, I just ask you to share a bit about what you intend to bring to the participants at Modern Minuteman. The reason why I brought you on, or why I asked you to be an instructor, is that you are somebody who's doing something in the real world rather than theoretically only exploring these questions. And so what can people expect to kind of learn from you when they sign up?
Mostly from my direct experience running this organization. Basically, there are two sides of it. How do you need to change yourself such that people are willing to work with you and follow you? And then secondly, how do you actually manage that social organism? How do you time your interactions, schedule your meetings, conduct your meetings, what kind of etiquette? And then when you're dealing with members at different ranks, what do you have to watch out for not scaring people away? How do you also don't be so inclusive that you have no standards. So there's a fine balance that I think experience has to teach. And I'm not claiming to have perfectly arrived at like that sweet spot, but we are scaling very quickly and it's so far pretty successful. So I'm very happy to share, what insights I've gleaned as far as changing myself to be someone who people want to follow, and also changing how our community as a whole gets on and organizes.
Right. Great. I guess then both of us are interested in people doing good and productive things, whether it is with us or without us, right? Like we want this thing to succeed on the whole. We are mission driven rather than, let's say, profit driven. So please, if you guys are doing projects already, raise your own hand as well. Ask for the support from the people around you that can help you out. Go apply to return to the land and see whether they'll accept you and whether you can play a useful and contributive role at the organization. And then lastly, I guess I'll just share the link again. You can join us at modernminuteman.net and you can use Eric's code Orwoll for $50 off. This is something that I've put together as a practical way for people to get out of this malaise of just frustratedly sharing stuff on social media, perhaps feeling a bit disconnected, not really having a professional future. The game is to get around other people, to build strong relationships, and to work on real things rather than these kind of anxiety reducing or dispersing activities. So check out Modern Minuteman, check out Return to the Land, join us for this program, and we hope to see you in these contexts. Thank you again, Eric, for coming.
Yeah, of course. Glad to be here.